Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Speaking on Demand. Heard some feedback from you viewers last time that you enjoyed the video product in addition to the podcast product. So we're back here on video. Today I am excited to welcome our guest, Norm Bilsbury. Norm and I have known each other for a couple of years. We live pretty close to each other. Norm's in Champaign, Illinois, and I'm just outside of Champaign. Norm, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great today, Aaron. Thanks for having me on.
One of the reasons why I'm so excited to always talk with you is because you and I were both really passionate about the business of selling, and it's key in everyone's job really. But for me, being a sales rep and having done this now for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years in B2B sales, I always like to get little tactics and strategies. And your business, I've heard, has been doing really well. Tell us about how things are going for you.
Well, thank you for that. And yes, it has gone well in the past year, but that has not been without its challenges. And it was definitely a learning year for me, a challenging year, and surprising that it turned out as well as it did.
When we were talking a little bit offline before we got recording here, we were talking about some of the challenges that every sales rep has faced, or every selling individual has faced with COVID-19. You know, rewind back to March, and in a lot of industries, all business completely stops. And, you know, talking about our industry where you're doing speaking and consulting on the art of selling, mine, you know, booking speakers like yourself for clients, and now all meetings have stopped. One of the traps that I know I fell into, and that probably a lot of sales reps fell into, was just completely pulling back, not prospecting, you know, not wanting to aggravate clients, and really just trying to solve problems. And I think that we've gotten to the point now where we're coming up on 1 year into COVID-19. Could you kind of talk through some of those challenges and how the mindset really needs to change and get back into this mode of selling and prospecting and relationship building?
Absolutely. And you know, Aaron, we have connected on the subject of sales and business development and the challenges around that. And really, that's where I started out as an undergrad at University of Illinois. One of my first jobs was selling books door to door with the Southwestern Company. And I learned the hard task of selling by making some 12,000 cold calls in 3 summers, working on 100% commission during that time. And if salespeople like anything, they like a routine, right? They like to develop a system, and they like to figure out, you know, what behaviors, if I replicate them, will lead to success. And no doubt, COVID-19 threw a big wrench in the middle of anybody's system, right? In that whatever you thought you were doing at that time, things stopped, and all of a sudden, everybody was, you know, had the big question mark. Well, can I even keep doing what I'm doing? And what am I supposed to do? So I think if there is anything shared in the business space last year for any business, it was just this incredible, what I would call acute level of disruptive change, which hit the market and affected everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about my strategy as COVID-19 hit, and as our events, I mean, we had like over 100 events pretty quickly get rescheduled. And of course that caused problems with cash flow, that caused all kinds of different problems. But I quickly got my head wrapped around the fact that, okay, right now is not the time to worry about the bottom line, about selling. Yes, we need to survive as a business, and we're a small boutique bureau, as you know. The main thing for me was, okay, how can we help make this as easy as possible? Like, I want to remove every layer of friction possible in getting these meetings rescheduled. So I became a problem solver and not a salesperson. And I know that's probably the definition of a salesperson, a problem solver, but we went into complete problem solve mode. And I think, you know, got very comfortable doing that. And then as virtual meetings started to become booked, so you name whatever industry it was, you know, change happened, and then something else started to happen. Maybe an opportunity arose, And I think I probably didn't jump on that as aggressively as I could have. Have there been any clients or any partners that you've worked with or coached that kind of had that similar journey? And what were some of the tips that you gave them?
Absolutely. I don't. I think I myself was going through it. I know I was in my business, and I know many of my clients were. And let me just kind of pick out 2 points that you just mentioned and talk around those 2 points a little bit. The first thing that I just want to commend you for, and I think this is hard for anybody who really hasn't worked in sales to realize, but it's the epitome of what makes a business successful, and that's revenue, right? I mean, that's how at the end of a day a business is judged whether it's successful or not is revenue. But the interesting thing about revenue is if you go directly for the money and that's all you watch, money is the fruit of delivering a service or a product or solving somebody's problem. Money is not the direct result of doing that. It is a byproduct. And so what I want to commend you for, and what I hope everybody's thinking about is like, okay, if I'm just watching the money, that is a lagging indicator. That is not a leading indicator of what's going to make you successful. And so you have to think about, how are we delivering our services? How are we truly solving our clients' problems? Or what products are we getting to market? And that comes into the second idea that you brought up, which I think is very wise, and that is the idea of change. Now, what's a little bit different about my background is, after going into sales, I had gotten some feedback from some of my clients, like, you're a good speaker, you're a good teacher, you're a good coach. You really should be doing more of that. And I enjoyed those things, but I didn't feel like I had the credibility to do them very well. So I went back to school, and I probably stayed in school too long. I got a master's degree in training and development, and then I got a PhD at University of Illinois in change management. And that's why I'm zeroing in on this idea that you brought up, Aaron, of change. Because when you study the psychology of change, I think this is one thing that a lot of businesses failed to realize how dramatically it impacted them. And change management, the field of change management, actually originated with the grief work that a psychologist named Sarah Kubler-Ross did around the death and dying. And she gave us a quick acronym to describe the dynamics and the psychology of change, which I'd like to share with you right now, because what I'm going to do is share this and then turn this into a question. Because if businesses are examining or experiencing any of these things, I think you'll readily see why. And so the acronym she gave us was SARA, and the S stands for shock, the A stands for anger, the R stands for rejection, the A stands for acceptance, and then the H in SARA stands for help. And this is really it's an S curve. If you know anything about the work of Charles Handy, and an S curve starts down, then it goes up. So the shock, oh my gosh, I can't believe I lost all this business. I can't believe COVID won't let me call on my customers. What's going to happen to my revenue stream, right? And then the anger. You mean I can't even go call on people directly anymore? Oh my gosh, my business is going to go under, right? And then what happens so the negative increases on the top of this S curve, and that's very important to understand. And you can think about this in your own personal life. If you've lost a loved one, or if you've gone through something traumatic, first you're scared, and then you get angry about it, right?
Yep.
And then sometimes the tendency is to push solutions away. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to reject that, right? And then we start to go into the dip. But when we hit that low level, we realize we need to change. There's something going on. We've gone through the initial emotion, and that's where we come to the place of acceptance. We come to the place of help. And so this is a little bit of like the smashing of a fist that hit people's businesses that was incredibly disruptive, that nobody foresaw. And naturally, it would affect sales teams, especially because sales teams want a routine, they want a system, they want a predictability, because everybody's looking to create consistent revenue and consistent growth. And when that system gets disrupted and blown up, it's traumatic psychologically, right? People are worried about how they're going to feed their families.
Yep.
So
I think that I can see myself very quickly on larger issues like COVID-19 and smaller issues like, oh, I made a mistake to our YouTube page and I now have to redo it. I can see all those emotions of the S curve. Um, it's probably, is it something where different individuals can work through that at a different rate?
Absolutely. And the what what we would know from behavioral psychology that would suggest this is really understanding how you're hardwired in terms of like something around a Myers-Briggs tool or a
Yep.
DISC tool, right? These types of tools give us an insight to our hardwiring. We know that if you're, for instance, like um, an a steady relator on DISC, S's hate change, and so S's want to go along with the team and everything else, but inside they don't like the disruption. Now, if you worked with a high D, then all of a sudden, somebody who's very dominant, they're going, okay, things have changed. We've got to change. Let's make the pivot. And so, depending on a little bit on how you're hardwired, we will embrace or push away this change depending upon that internal chemistry.
So you mentioned something in the last thing that the last response that you were talking about. We were talking about calling on people and how, we used to go to their office or meet at a coffee shop. And now there are products, all these products like Microsoft Teams and Zoom. Where do you see the virtual relationship between the seller and the buyer? Do you see that getting back to in person, or do you see that maybe settling as some sort of a hybrid where it's more acceptable to make a Zoom call than it is to go to the office and meet with them? Of course, once it's deemed safe to do so. What's kind of your prediction of what that relationship building process might look like in the future?
Well, I think on the outset, there's definitely a hybrid emerging, depending upon how well relief from the pandemic, what those recovery curves look like. So I do think the salesperson is going to have to adapt and develop a hybrid skill set.
No, I got you. Yeah, that way, because one of the things that I'm trying to think about and evaluate in our business when it comes to the events landscape is our business model was almost entirely based on live in-person events. I mean, we would have one or two hybrid or streaming events every year if you rewound back 2 or 3 years, and they always made me so nervous because
Yeah,
first of all, they don't
sure.
cost as much typically, and then second of all, there's just a lot of technology that can get in the way. Well, now things have stabilized a lot on the tech side, and we're booking a lot of virtual stuff. But anyways, it has been so interesting to see that, and I anticipate in our business, I anticipate a great opportunity for virtual to kind of hang on. I see it as maybe, someone was explaining it like, okay, well, if I can get back and give a live in-person keynote, how great would it be to follow up with that audience 90 days later to check in, use it as an accountability point and an additional revenue stream. Maybe, not as much as a keynote, but there's some value there. We used to set up these things called follow-up calls with some speakers. Follow-up call, phone call, it would be kind of worked into the price. Well, now there's an opportunity to make that even more personal. And I think, at least for our product, which is a talk where we hope that a talk spurs action, change, maybe a new idea for the company. And one great new idea or innovation could completely crush an ROI of bringing a paid speaker in to speak. So I'm excited for the future of virtual, not just from a selling perspective, but also, you know, like with our business and what you do too, I guess to consult clients. Um, so I wanted to ask you, so real quickly, so one of the things that stands out, Norm, when we met and had lunch a couple of years ago, you told me this crazy story about how you kind of like did this complete career change, took the jump and went out on your own and started your own business and doing the sales and consulting and everything. And it involves a pretty prominent thought leader, Simon Sinek. Do you think you could give us the Cliff Notes story of that? Or if you'd be so kind to share, I think that's a really cool story.
Oh, absolutely. And it really speaks to, Simon's character. I will tell you, for all the great things he posts on LinkedIn, and if you've ever seen some of his videos, sometimes people have these on and off the stage gaps in their personality, and on stage they're very likable and warm, and when you talk to them, maybe they're not that in real life.
Oh,
Um,
we're well aware of that. Yeah. Most
okay,
speakers are
okay.
amazing, but they're, every so often we'll hear some things, and so, those are things that you remember.
Yeah. Well, let me just vouch personally for Simon's off the stage character, because I mean, it really is, it speaks to how much what he really does aligns with what he says. And that just shows his integrity and his commitment to what he really tries to do, which make the world a better place, better together, right? One of his more recent books. So, my story is, I had been in a role I've been very successful in for many years. I was working in my second startup in medical devices, and had two or had an exit with a previous medical device company for about $800 million. I was not an executive. I was a field marketing guy and sales guy. So I did well, but I was still working, and I was on another startup, and Simon came to speak, and he spoke about your purpose and your why and everything, and I was just in the back, kind of wrecked, like listening to this talk, going, I like something was just so wrong with my daily routine of just continuing what I was doing, and I had a young family, so naturally I didn't want to take a whole lot of risk, and I just knew I had to take care of that family and put bread on the table and everything else, but something was going on inside of me where I just felt like I had to jump out and do something different. But honestly, I was afraid. And what really was going on is, I shared that, I had gone to school, and really the purpose of going to graduate school was to look across the table from a CEO and advise them comfortably. And so when I finished my PhD, I felt like a little bit like a medical doctor who had done a residency but had never done a fellowship, meaning they never really operated on somebody, right? And
Yeah.
so I had a lot of theoretical knowledge, but I didn't have any street smarts. And I felt like I needed to go to get that. And of course, we talked about the essence and the guts of a business is learning it from sales. And so I did sales and training and marketing roles in various companies just to make sure I had a boots on the ground perspective of what engine really made a business grow. And I'd done that for almost 14 years, and so at this point in my life, I was in my mid 40s, and it was just time for a change. And listening to Simon, he was kind of poking me in that spot, but I was just too afraid to ask my wife for permission to do this or to take that risk. But an interesting thing happened at the end of the talk. It was kind of like, honestly, I don't know if you've ever been in this position. You hear a great talk and you're like, oh, I want to go talk to the speaker. But if you
Yeah.
do, you'll look like a stalker. So you don't do that, right? And so it was in Miami. And so I went to the beach and I went for a long walk and, waved at the seagulls and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I got back and I was getting on the elevator, and somebody was getting off the elevator, and nose to nose, we bumped into each other. It was Simon. And he took one look at me, and the weirdest thing happened. He just took one look at me and he goes, you and I should talk. And he goes, follow me. And he was head out to catch his taxi to the airport. He goes, what's going on? And I just shared with him, like, wow, your talk really wrecked me. And he's like, well, why is that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And he's like, well, we should talk about that. He goes, here's my secretary's number. I want you to call me. I'm going to give you free coaching until we figure this out for you. And I was like shocked. And he followed through on that. And when we finished kind of drafting all the documents from my why, I knew I had to quit my corporate job and hang up a shingle and start my own consulting and training company.
That's pretty amazing. And it's, I've felt like that too. You see a great talk, and thankfully in my position, I do have an opportunity to talk with the speakers. And that's one of the things I love about the job. But, Simon is somebody that we bring speaking offers to pretty regularly. And the guy's so busy now that he doesn't accept a lot of them. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty cool story. And that's just one of those things to me that reminds me, okay, by me or by our little company making a match of a speaker and putting them in the right audience, not that I booked Simon for that event, but somebody did. And that caused just monumental change in your life and different trajectory and all that. So that is the true power of a talk. But it's really cool to hear that he took some time and dug in and did some coaching with you. Yeah. Um, okay. So what are some tips, or I don't know, what are some things that you've coached sales reps on recently? Like what are some tools, resources that you're using, that you're teaching nowadays, if there's any advice that you could give to a sales audience that's listening out there?
Yes. So I think the key thing right now, really, and I understand that you're asking me to talk to a sales, somebody in a sales role, but I think the key thing is really to start. Change always starts at the top, and really, sales people, and we know this through neuropsychology today, that their demeanor, their attitude, they're really reflecting the attitude of their leadership. And so, um, you know, if you remember the movie, remember the Titans,
Yep.
and you had, the two main characters having kind of a face off, and the one guy says to the other guy, attitude reflects leadership. And so, if salespeople are confused, if salespeople are struggling, if they're lacking confidence, if they're not knowing the opportunities in their current landscape, that is a direct reflection of the attitude of leadership. And so let me just kind of speak to that a little bit, because here's the thing. We talked about this at the beginning of our conversation about how the landscape has changed and how that impacts what your go-to-market strategy is, right? And so I think one clear example in history, probably, General Dwight D. Eisenhower said this of Douglas MacArthur. He said that the invasion of Incheon Harbor was one of the most brilliant military strategies of the 20th century. And so, what factors were involved in that strategy, right? And what did MacArthur take into consideration? And I think the key thing is landscape. And what is happening today during COVID? It's a landscape issue, right? The landscape is changing, and when the landscape changes, it changes everything. It is a radical level of change. And so, what did MacArthur do? He knew he could not, North Korea was, attacking, and he knew he couldn't meet them by land, because at that time in history, the Soviets had fortified them with tanks. And there was one place he could, at the Incheon Harbor. But the key thing was the harbor was narrow, which, the funneling effect, which is a bad thing in any military strategy, because you're condensing your troops to one certain area. But the other thing was the tides were super intense. And so MacArthur knew he couldn't go by land, and so he had to go on the rising tide. And so he had to assess what factors within the landscape gave him the edge, right? And so when he did this, he set himself up for success, and the American troops. And it was a huge burden to him. He really felt like he would be eternally judged for whether or not, because there's so many lives at risk, right? And here's the thing, leaders, I want to speak to you right now. Do you have a position of confidence? And is your mindset one of confidence? Because if you don't have that confidence, neuropsychology would suggest that even if you have a sales team in the lower 48 or around the world, whatever attitude you have about your market, it's projected on your calls, it's projected in your Zoom conversations. And you have a winning mindset. And have you reassessed your strategy to really leverage the opportunities that this current landscape affords that we didn't have before? And so let me just highlight that, because see, if you really don't believe that, your people don't believe that. And if your people don't believe that, they're not executing with a sense or an expectation of success. They're going in apologetic. They're going in, I'm calling you for the 10th time on the phone. I mean, there's just, there's an attitude of insecurity rather than of confidence. And so let's talk about some of the upsides and the change in the landscape. And so while people cannot do what they used to do, which is call directly on people in person, because, they have to get a temperature check, or they have to get a vaccination, or they or they just, a business just won't allow visitors in, right? So
Yep.
we have to come in with another entry, and there's a narrowing, just like MacArthur had. There's a very narrow entry, right? And it's probably email, and it's probably something with a video, right? And so one tactic that you can do is use a tool like Vidyard and send a video email, right? Now, there's some advantages to that right now. And what are some of the advantages? Well, an email is just text. Well, if we study, and I'm a communication major as an undergrad, and we know that the least important aspect of any message are the actual words. What's more important is the tone. And then what's way more important is the body language and the gestures. An email is only text. So we take a look at a communication pie, the effectiveness of communication, only 3% are the words. So everybody's been leading with emails. But actually, what this does is if you send a video email right now through Vidyard or something like that, is a way to differentiate yourself, which is, by the way, a free tip. One way you always get an edge is how do you differentiate? And so if you do something like that, people can hear your tone. They can hear your sincerity. They can see it in your eyes, whether or not you truly believe you have a solution for them. That is something an email never afforded. So that's one upside. Do you want me to pause there, or do you
No,
want me to
I just wanted to jump in and say I love the parallel that you drew between the military story and exactly what sales teams are facing right now. That narrow opening. I mean, I see it. I live it every single day. I think that that's a really interesting way to think about it, and I appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay, well, let me just kind of
Go on.
just prepare one other opportunity I think that people miss in the new landscape that I think is definitely a benefit. And so, um, while things seem fast at the beginning of the old sales cycle pre-COVID, like you could get in, you could start conversations, right? And okay, we got the pipeline is filled, right? Where were things delayed? And always on the back end with decision makers. Well, we can't get our decision makers together, right? Well, so what's interesting is there's a little bit of like where what you lost was definitely slowed down, like getting access. Actually, on the back end, you gained something because now with Zoom, it's pretty easy to get. If you have a complex buying cycle with many purchasing stakeholders, and this is more for that consultative sell with a longer selling cycle,
Yep.
it's never been easier to get everybody you need on one call. And so what I'm sharing with salespeople and with sales executives and with CEOs is much like MacArthur assessed the landscape to understand where he could get a strategic leverage. We too need to stop back and assess what are the strengths about our current landscape. And I just wanted to share that, Aaron, as something else that could take in consideration. Why? Because here's the thing. Salespeople want to be on winning teams, and employees want to be in companies that win. And if you as the CEO don't believe you can win, do you know that your people, they smell that, they feel that, they
Yep.
know that. I mean, how many of us have ever been on a team as a kid where the coach doesn't believe you can win? And how many of us wanted to stay on that team? So here's the thing I want to encourage all CEOs. What is it going to take you to win? What are the advantages in the new landscape? And do you really believe that? And if you grab a hold of that and apprehend that and do that analysis, that confidence is going to project your team, and that's going to you're going to retain that good talent. And at the same time, people are going to carry that out into the field, that belief that they can win.
I love this. I always love talking with you, Norm. I mean, it's definitely that is such a great insight about the sales cycle and where the delay was for a lot of industries and where it is now. Totally true with my thing too. I mean, we're getting much quicker, shorter lead times. People are booking speakers 30 days prior to an event, 2 weeks prior to an event. That never happened back in the day. If that happened back in the day, you were just disorganized.
Yeah.
Well, now, I think people want to make as much of a real-time decision as possible and not plan too far out in the future. Super great insight. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Tell us, hey.
And let me just interject. That is all because we don't have to organize calendars around travel.
That's very true. Yeah.
So see,
no one's going anywhere.
That is another insight about what's better about the new landscape.
Yeah.
And you know what's better about that is you don't have to wait for planes in an airport. So
if if you're a meeting planner listening to this right now, and if you have a sales audience, anybody that needs some sort of motivation, additional tools in the the toolkit, I know that this is just the tip of the iceberg that Norm has shared with us today. Norm, is there anything else that you want to share with meeting planners about? I know you do a lot of consulting, but like if you were to come in and deliver like a 60-minute keynote and a Q&A, anything else that you'd like to share about that package that you would offer or topics that you cover right now?
well, I think the essence of doing a job like that well is to first understand what challenge is the business trying to address, right? And really figuring out if there's a fit. But that really begins by just having a conversation where you don't assume you're going to work together or you're trying to win business or anything like that. I think the real commitment there is just to try to figure out what challenges or problems is are the event planners trying to solve for their organization. What does their organization need the most, and just have a discussion around defining that and to see if there's a potential fit.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I know that you are one of those speakers that you take a lot of pride in learning and researching the company and the audience prior to crafting your presentations, and I really appreciate that about you. Um, Anything else that you want to share? I mean, this was a really fun conversation. We could probably go on for hours and keep talking about different sales stuff. I definitely took some things away that I'm going to sit back and reflect on and apply to my business. For those of you guys listening out there, hopefully you do the same, because there's definitely some good nuggets.
Aaron, nothing more really to add on my end. Been a pleasure to be on here. It's a privilege to be invited, and it's always fun to have a chance to talk with you. And thank you for having me on.
It's been great. Hit me up, give me a call, email me. If you've got a sales audience anytime in the next 6 to 9 months that needs to get together for either a sales meeting or motivation, Norm would be a great person to either bring in when it's safe to travel or to tap into a virtual talk. Thanks for joining us on Speaking on Demand. Aaron Rayberg signing off. Norm Bilsbury, have yourself a great rest of the day, sir.
Thank you. You too, Aaron.
Take care.